Welcome to Fintech Daydreaming, the podcast that dives into the world of banking technologies and the ever-changing landscape of fintech companies. We bring you real-life examples from global and local thought leaders, as well as experts working within the financial industry, and seek out the best stories from the front lines of financial services innovation, where dreams of industry pioneers meet reality. Hosted by Paul Krogdahl and Ville Janne. This is Fintech Daydreaming.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Fintech Daydreaming. My name is Ville Janne. I will be your host for this week's episode of Nordic Fintech Highlights. And as usual, I'm joined by my good friends and co-hosts, Paul and Janne. And let's start with you, Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good, although I'm starting to get that tingling, exciting feeling because, as you know, my partner and I, or should I say girlfriend, we've signed up for the Stockholm Marathon. And as a little bit of a teaser, we've also decided to do the Helsinki Half Marathon. And the Helsinki Half Marathon is just under 2 weeks away. So lots of training, lots of running, lots of finding excuses for why I shouldn't be running in the first place. But excited about it, I think.
Yeah,
possibly.
and for the record, when you say partner this time, it's not me, it's someone else.
That's why I added in girlfriend. Unless you have sort of secretly changed sex, or I'm misgendering you suddenly now when we're not allowed to gender anyone anymore. But last time I checked, you were not female, you were not my girlfriend, and I've got a girlfriend. We'll leave it at that.
Okay, let's leave it at that.
Yes.
Okay, so with that premise, Jan, how are you?
I'm good. Actually, now when Paul started to talk about marathons, so I opened a game. I'm trying to attract some friends to join me next year at the famous Medoc Marathon in Bordeaux, France.
I might join you on that. Let's see if my adorable girlfriend sort of survives the Stockholm Marathon, and if she does, then we might join you on it. Let's get back to you on that.
Awesome. I think you have to be early on with that one to sign up, and then also remember to practice to run with some oysters in your belly and wine in your head.
That sounds fantastically interesting. Actually, I discovered today, as I was looking at the details for the Helsinki, they're calling it the Helsinki City Run because they're doing a number of different events on exactly the same Saturday. But there is a after run party in a nightclub in Helsinki that all the runners are, can go to, and the entry is your medal. So if you finish the run, you get entry with your medal. So that to me sounds like a real good motivation to finish the race.
Sounds like a pretty tired party, to be honest, but after a marathon or a half marathon. But anyway, good luck with everything. We're going to keep our listeners kind of up to speed about how you're doing, of course, once you do complete the especially the Stockholm Marathon, provided that you live, because there's always a chance you don't. So again, you never know. Good, but enough about that. And by the way, yes, I'm doing well as well. So I just came back 2 weeks ago, actually, from Coachella in California, and I can say that even though it's been 2 weeks, I feel like I'm still jet lagged. I don't know what's going on with this. Maybe it's the age. Getting old, so jet lag is really affecting me. But let's see if this goes away by the time I go for my next thing and my summer vacation starts. But more on Coachella actually later as part of the news discussions. But let's get on with it. This is a fintech podcast, I've heard, after all. So let's get to the fintech topics. Janne, as usual, we start with the overview from April. So how was the fintech scene here in the Nordics in April?
Well, quite typical stuff, but for once there was actually quite a lot of funding rounds, especially on the early stage side. So the big round of April was Froda, raising 20 million euros. We'll get into that, but then there were also 6 other very early stage seed and pre-seed funding rounds. So I think that's always positive news that there are newcomers to the industry. Quite many of them were actually related to insurance. So let's see if that's the next new wave within financial innovation. Then we had some traditional news, some tech partnership with banks, more A2A payment things. But then also not only related to Nordics, I think the big news which came out in April was the Q4 or 2024 results of Revolut, because that was really something that actually, or at least caught my attention, because Revolut has been something that's been burning a lot of VC money throughout the years, and there's been a lot of questions. Do they have a sustainable business model? How is it going to turn out? And now they were showing pretty impressive numbers, like 4 billion in revenue and 1 billion net profit in dollars from the last year. And I think that's a very strong message that first of all, neobanking can be profitable, and secondly, Revolut is here to stay, and they actually now have a big customer base and a lot of money, so they can basically do whatever they like and disrupt whatever they like. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I've been saying this for quite some time, that the new players are going to grow. And I think that a lot of incumbent banks have almost been sitting on their laurels. I've been known in the past to say that they're arrogant to a certain degree, but I think it's almost a notion of too big to fail. And I think it's about time that the incumbent banks start to wake up a little bit and see what's going on. I don't think they're going to die completely. Brett King has been known for saying that the days of the incumbent banks are numbered. I don't think it's going to be that bad, but I definitely think we're going to start seeing the likes of Revolut and other neobanks continue to grow as they delight customers with going beyond customer expectations, whilst the incumbent banks continue to disappoint a lot of their customers in delivering capabilities. So I think we're going to see an interesting tug of war going on, and I think it's going to grow here in the Nordics as well. I think we've had this discussion before. Embedded finance is going to start tickling away at this. So I think the next year and a half, we're going to see some interesting things happening in the Nordics and across Europe. That's my view on it.
Yeah, I completely agree. If you follow the trajectory of Revolut from loss-making startup company burning a lot of JV money, then into barely profitable, and then they were largely dismissed by incumbent banks by saying that no, but this is just a startup. They're not really a bank. It's just a prepaid card. Well, then they got a banking license, and then they have all these compliance problems. They don't have the compliance controls. They're not their compliance team is there's a lot of people leaving and coming back and forth on the compliance team. So again, they're not serious business. They're going away. And now when they turn a profit, well, it is the high interest rates. The environment currently for interest rates is making it possible to have it profitable. Well, now we're seeing the interest rate environment change again to be less high. It's still high, but not as high. And yet we're seeing these phenomenal profits from Revolut. And they keep on beating the odds, so to say, when it comes to beating the incumbent banks on many fronts. And now we're seeing all sorts of interesting movements. Not only they're spinning out their investment app into a separate application, they're increasing their portfolio of services around the Ultra product at the moment. So they are going to go up against American Express Platinum customers, or competing directly for that customer segment with the Ultra product. So it's a really interesting story to follow on many fronts. And,
but I think I've covered this before as well, and true story, as they say. I talked about this recently, where I was on vacation in Spain again with my girlfriend, and she lost her wallet. And she had, at that time, as we've seen a lot of people in the Nordics having one banking relationship, she had a relationship with one of the large incumbent banks in the Nordics. She lost her wallet. She had only one card. We jumped onto the mobile app for that bank. We said lost card, order new card. And the only thing we got was your new card will be delivered within 2 business working weeks. No, you're stuck in Spain. Do you need extra cash? Can you survive? Anything else like that, which the bank knew because of transactional data. And let's be honest, what we did was we said we need to do something. So we went and downloaded the Revolut app. Within 5 minutes, she was onboarded as a customer. She had a digital card that she could be spending with. We used SEPA by instant payment to take money from her incumbent account bank to the Revolut account. So she now had the ability to spend money back on a card again. Her major bank now is Revolut. Yes, she still has the incumbent bank, but she has lost, that bank has lost that relationship. And it's about the neo banks are delighting customers. They are there for the customers when the customers need them, rather than being arrogant.
Yeah. And one of the almost like behind the scenes things that Revolut is doing that people don't seem to highlight as much is very interesting to me, because I work with the digital currencies, the digital euro and the instant payment space in Europe in general, is that just by downloading the Revolut app, you have instant payments globally within the Revolut ecosystem. But because they are licensed in so many places, that becomes a hugely valuable proposition. It's the main thing that Wise does, for example. For Revolut, it's just another feature in top of everything else that they have. So it is an incredible journey, and we could spend the next hour just talking about everything they do. And we would, of course, prefer to maybe have somebody from Revolut as a guest maybe in the future, but we'll leave that there for now. But hey, let's move on. And as is tradition, we cannot have an episode without a joke. And Janne, as we agreed, you will do the joke honors this week. So do you have a joke for us?
Of course I do. Subscription economy joke.
Wow.
So, what do you call two monkeys that share an Amazon account?
I'm scared of getting the answer to this.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Prime mates.
Hey, was that the first actually good joke that we've ever had on the podcast?
I like that. I think we need to make you the chief joke officer of FinTech Daydreaming, Janne.
Thank you for the honor, yeah.
Oh, yeah, wow, yeah, that's a break from tradition to have a good joke, but yeah, fantastic job. I think that sets up perfectly to discuss the news from April around the Nordic fintech scene, and maybe a little bit outside towards the end. But let's start from you, Paul, this week. So which news story did you pick up from the newsletter?
As always is the case, there's lots of interesting news that seems to be happening in the Nordics every single month when it comes to fintech and banking. But the one that I picked up on, obviously being a passionate supporter of the growth of embedded finance, the minute I saw that there was new news in the area of embedded finance, SME banking, and like you said, Janne, big funding rounds, I had to pick up on the Froda announcement, where Froda has now, like you said, raised 20 million euros on their Series B funding, which is going to help them to expand into Europe. And I think Froda is a really interesting one, right? Because they are, as a fintech, they are focused on lending towards the SME space. Now, we are seeing a growth of this. We've got Alisa Bank here in Finland that's focusing on the SME space. They're focusing a little bit more, though, on that through into the SME corporates and the sort of package applications there. What Froda is doing is giving loans to particularly very small early stage SME customers. And the way that they're funding these, I thought was really interesting, because what they're doing is they've turned around and offer good value retail saving to retail customers. So people like you and me, any individuals, we get a very nice interest rate on our savings. We can put our money into savings with Froda, and then Froda, what they do is they take that money, turn it around and lend it to SMEs. It's the same model that all banks have got, really. I mean, at the end of the day, we deposit money, they take that money to make money. But here what they've done is they've sort of saying, well, we will give you a good interest because we're charging a good interest, so on and so forth. There's the risk and everything else. But a nice model. I like it. And again, it's nice to see another fintech demonstrating yet again that there is value to be had in embedded finance. Like I always say, the future of banking will be dominated by platforms, and these platforms are growing. They're growing slowly but surely here in the Nordics, and I think this is fantastically interesting.
Indeed, indeed. I start to observe some patterns in the embedded finance space. Doesn't seem to be one like super provider of all possible embedded finance solutions and platforms and products. And they're quite niche. So we have lending here. We have different embedded finance companies providing services around payments and transactions. We have insurance embedded finance companies. All of them are individual companies. So I guess just speculating here, are we going to see maybe consolidation on this in the future? Or is this the new normal where we have a lot of smaller providers providing embedded services under one super kind of customer journey umbrella on the larger platforms? It's an interesting journey to follow.
Yeah, I've been considering this quite a bit myself as well. I wrote a blog post, gosh, it must be a year and a half ago now, if not longer, where I speculated that I don't believe we're ever going to see the growth of super apps in Europe as you've seen in Asia Pacific, the WeChats, etc. The consumer market is slightly different here. And I think that we will see consolidation of players that are playing in the same domain or in the same vertical. But I don't think we're going to see consolidation of players trying to build that sort of holistic, we will do everything. It's going to be more of best of breeds. And those best of breeds are going to deliver capabilities to platforms, to third parties going forwards. This, I also think, though, is a interesting dynamic for the incumbent banks, because this will line us up nicely for potential mergers and acquisitions, where the incumbent banks can actually step into the embedded finance space by initially maybe partnering with some of these best of breeds, but also then potentially looking at acquiring them to enrich their own capabilities going forwards in the future. That's my view on what's going to happen in Europe and the Nordics anyway.
Yeah, and to that point, further, there's an interesting dynamic here, which is that Lunar is one of Froda's partners that they have partnered with in the financing space. But also Lunar has a legal entity called Moonrise for embedded payments in the enterprise space. So it's kind of got these constellations coming together, and interesting to see who's going to be the kind of the big platform in the middle or on top, and which are going to be consolidating maybe in the future, or are we going to see even more bigger ecosystems build like this? Anyway, interesting stuff. So Janne, your take?
Yeah, interesting indeed. And this generally SME finance has been traditionally quite the underserved area. And now we've seen, as you mentioned, the Lunar thing, we discussed it a couple of episodes ago. So Froda has been partnering with déjà and Lunar for quite a while and expanding the collaboration, and now with the funding Froda is receiving. So it's very interesting to see where they are going next, because I think they have the potential of doing their standalone business, bringing the nice business model which has been more common in the consumer industry to the SME sector. But then bringing this entire embedded finance game in the equation, collaborating with Lunar, but then with who knows in the future. So really, I'm looking forward to see how this will be the disruptor in the SME financing or generally payments and banking space in overall.
Yeah, and we just in the previous episode we had Stamsalainen from Alisa Bank, like you mentioned, Paul. And they indeed, one part of the founding of Alisa Bank is a company called Pura Finance, which does pretty much exactly this. And now again, through Alisa's journey, they are in the embedded finance space as well as a fully licensed and publicly listed bank. So yeah, again, the journey towards embedded continues, as we have predicted many times on the podcast as well. Good. Let's close the book on that one, or maybe even better, we turn the page to the next story from the newsletter, and that's coming from you, Janne, I believe.
Yes. So yeah, my news is about BNPL and Klarna, of course. So in the US market, Klarna has partnered with Clover. That's a point of sale terminal provider. In the US market, they have around 700,000 stores, 10% market share in the US. And now they're bringing the Klarna BNPL to the payment terminal. So basically, when you go and pay, you can click the Klarna button. This is something like we have seen as with the infamous Mash in Finland, for instance. But now they're bringing it to 100,000 merchants in the US market. And yeah, now the question is what's the catch here? I suppose Klarna wants to bring their payment infrastructure everywhere. So it's not only e-commerce solution, but it's also in stores, and eventually they could have the entire value chain of the payments, of course, to just generate more revenue and reach more customers. Then of course the question is, what is the catch for the customer? Is the catch that consumers can go and buy groceries for 10 euros and pay it later? I guess Paul has something to say about that approach, but could it just be more like hey, Klarna is now making a super app with their own payment network and becoming like the we pay, or how will it end up? But really looking to get at least Paul's comment on the BNPL boom.
Yeah, I feel there's a rant coming. So Paul, the stage is yours.
Time to get back onto my soapbox here. Yes, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone. I think everybody knows that I'm not a big fan of BNPL. At a large scale, I have no problems with it. We've had credit for a very long time. You know, you go and buy a washing machine or something else, very often you'll get credit. And the fact that you're getting the ability to get the credit faster, I don't see much problem with that. What I have a problem with is this trend of enabling people that either don't have liquidity or cash, or even worse, they are very bad at managing their money, to be able to use buy now, pay later for their weekly shopping, because that just escalates dramatically fast. And before you know it, you're in way over your head in debt, even worse than you were with a credit card, because this you can distribute everywhere. So I'm not going to get back onto my soapbox about BNPL. But the other one, which I think is very interesting in this whole discussion, is payments. As payments infrastructure has been very US centric and very US dominated up until, and still is, if we particularly look at the card infrastructure. It's interesting to see European fintechs and payment providers starting to step into the US market, because maybe this is a way of creating some balance, between the US centric players and the European players. Maybe Klarna is looking to level the playing field a little bit. I'm just speculating here, and maybe that's an interesting dynamic for us to see, because it removes some of the strong dominance that some of the US players have got currently. I mean, Ville, you play a lot more in this space around payments, and particularly when you look at your digital euros and everything else. Do you see here a potential for a Klarna or someone else to come and level some of the dominance that Visa and MasterCard have got today?
The answer is maybe, but the key part of that conversation actually is not Klarna. It is the payment terminal. So in this case, it's the Clover terminal, which, by the way, is an interesting story by itself. Now they're owned by Pfizer, but they were one of the first products out there in the US market that had a kind of full touchscreen and kind of programmable interface, where you could, back then they already were saying that you could have these individual apps, even merchant apps, easily deployed onto the terminal. So they kind of brought this app store idea into the world of in-store payments. with these Clover terminals. Now, obviously, where they started, now the big part of Pfizer's acquiring business, or payment terminal business. So it's obviously a fantastically interesting story. But it's interesting to see that these things that we heard from Clover in the very beginning about having new types of payment methods easily accessible at the point of sale. Now this is exactly what's happening. Now we have a Klarna button there. So again, in a normal payment terminal here, or let's say more classic payment terminal you see here in the Nordics, for example, it's very hard to deploy new applications. You have to go through all sorts of hoops and certification and things like this. And it takes a long time to get a proprietary payment, if you call this like non-Visa MasterCard transactions proprietary payment solutions at the point of sale. Clover makes that threshold lower, or Clover being one of these programmable, quote-unquote, programmable payment terminals. So yeah, I think this is, we're kind of seeing this as an example of something that we talked about like 10 years ago for the first time, and interesting to see that it's happening right now. What's missing from this story, at least I wasn't able to find, and correct me, Janne, if I'm wrong, how do you authenticate the Klarna payment? So if when you choose from the Clover terminal that I want to pay with Klarna, what happens then? Does it push somehow? How does it identify you at the terminal? Did it say at all?
I did actually not find that. I know that there's been similar ones that's been kind of that you use your card actually as the authenticator, and then you kind of, you just use the card to link it to your Klarna account. But in this case, I'm not absolutely sure how does it work.
Yeah, interesting. Because then another interesting BNPL/Klarna story, of course, is that Apple Pay Later. So as part of the Apple Wallet, they support different BNPL providers in certain regions at least. So you're able to pay at the point of sale, and then the merchant gets paid immediately. But then you can choose how you finance that transaction, perhaps with BNPL, and that user experience is like super smooth. So so once these things start to happen and people will be able to choose the BNPL option even easier, I think this is going to be a fantastically interesting area to see how it develops. Because I share a lot of the concerns Paul has been talking about, which is that it's not healthy if you start paying for takeaway food, for example, with installments, and you will end up in trouble because you will lose track of how much can you actually spend. And we're seeing that as high non-repayment rates in certain Klarna regions and products areas for sure. But how does this evolve in the long term is an interesting phenomenon to observe. Good. Any final comments on this before we move on to the last story?
None from me, except for let's get more regulation and consumer protection on buy now, pay later globally.
It's good to move to the last story, which is also about BNPL, by the way. I absolutely had to force a story that involves the festival that I went to, Coachella, into this, and trying to find a fintech angle. And I was able to find it, which was that the Coachella festival made a statement that 60% of the tickets that they sold to the Coachella festival were paid with buy now, pay later. So 60% of the entire ticket volume of the festival. So for those who might not know, Coachella Festival is one of the better known, or maybe even best known festivals in the US. It's organized over 2 weekends in California near Palm Springs, in a place in the desert. Place is called Coachella, and the festival name is Coachella. And they have all the usual big names, and it's over 3 days, over 2 weekends. So it's a fantastic place to be. You can ask me more about that in person if you meet me. But the point here is that it's a big festival. There's a lot of people going, and a lot of people are spending a lot of money going to this festival. The average ticket price for the Coachella for 1 weekend is around $600-700 dollars, and then on top of that, everything in the festival is super expensive. So if you want to buy like a half a liter can of Heineken, it costs you 20 euros. So it is a fairly, you need to spend a lot of money to go there. Now, the interesting part here when it comes to BNPL is that Coachella Festival was one of the first music festivals to launch buy now, pay later option. I think it was already in 2010s almost, so it's a long time ago. But the adoption has now been steadily growing, and now it's up to 60% of the entire volume. And what makes this interesting from a BNPL standpoint is not the fact that you can now divide it into installments, but the fact that the Coachella Festival is actually not partnering with any credit provider, because what they do is they provide installments on a product that is entirely under their control, and there is no credit line. Because if you don't make all your payments before the festival, you will not be able to enter the festival. So again, there is no full payment, no service, no ticket to the festival. So with that, they're able to do this in a very lean way. And they also, what they do is they stick a service charge for the installments of, like, I think it was $41 of service charge per ticket. And they made more than $4 million profit just from these service fees. Then to add to the business case, if you fail to make all the installments, all the payments before the festival, not only will you not be able to enter the festival, you won't be getting your money back directly. You will be getting so-called Coachella credits. So they will be able to use those credits towards purchases from Coachella for other things. But you won't get your money back that you have put in so far. Plus, you have to pay a $50 fee for missing the last payment. There's an interesting story here because Coachella was sued earlier for this, because what they did is that they did not give this credit before. So if you missed an installment, you lost the money that you have already paid. But they were sued, so now they settled in a way that they provide this credit towards the payments that you have already made. So what makes this interesting from a fintech perspective is the fact that we have another new model in town. So when you are providing entrance to a fairly pricey entrance to a festival or any kind of an event, you can do this installment plans, and you don't need a licensed financial institution again in the background, because there is no credit line. You're not giving any money. You're just creating a schedule for the payments. So loosely speaking, it's not like buy now, pay later really, but it's close enough for this to be very tightly connected to this. And by the way, tying this back to the Nordics, is that we also, there's a couple of large festivals this summer in Finland, for instance, that are doing the exact same thing. And they're partnering directly with the ticket platforms, and they are not bringing in partners like Klarna or Afterpay or others who provide the BNPL capabilities. And the difference there is that if they do bring in like Klarna to do this, then the festival organizers will get paid upfront, and Klarna assumes the risk for the credit risk. But that is unnecessary from a merchant perspective, because you make much more better margins on taking the risk to yourself, especially in this case, because there actually is no risk for you as an organizer of the event. So that's a long explanation, but I found this dynamic to be super interesting, and especially considering the growth of this BNPL option for the festival tickets. So Janne, would you do a BNPL for your next festival ticket?
Yeah, actually, my question was that did you already check out? Do they have their own fintech team, or did they use some specific partner to implement that?
Yeah, so they, like I said, they did not use any of the classic BNPL providers, because the model that they went for was that they do it themselves. So they have the ticket platform providers facilitating the payments. So effectively, what you do is you pay with your card every time of the month comes that you have to pay, and they will handle the payments part of that as a merchant accepting the payments. But yeah, there's no classic kind of fintech in the background in that sense. There's just payment processing and then splitting that into installments from the ticket platform itself.
But yeah, definitely that sounds like an interesting model, and yeah, could start consulting the Finnish festivals around that, how to make some additional money with the installment fees.
Indeed, because again, the risk for you as an organizer is minimal, because then you can just deny entry and effectively resell the same ticket another time because all these festivals sell out always. So so you're able to just resell the ticket quite easily and still sell your own products with margin with these credits because you're not committed to pay back anything if they miss the payments. So interesting. So Paul, which festival are you going to with BNPL next?
Well, Ville, you know that I periodically join you on some of your weird, fantastic festivals, generally here in Finland. And maybe I should just say that we as Fintech Daydreaming are not sponsored by Coachella here. And Ville is an absolute, fantastic person going to all of these raves and events and everything else. But we're not sponsored by them unless they really want. Well,
yeah, we should look into that.
We're not really. We're not. We're a fintech podcast. We're not a rave podcast. But maybe we can have a spin-off at some point in time. Let's see. But that aside, isn't this just paying by installments? I was sort of sitting here listening to you and thinking about the very, very long, fantastic story that you gave us around this wonderful time that you had in the US. They let you in, by the way. I thought there was, did they check your phone and strip you naked?
No, I guess that's why they let me in.
That's why they let you in, okay. Yeah. But aren't we just reinventing paying by installments and giving it a new name and maybe a slight twist? I appreciate that buy now, pay later is to a certain degree just paying by installments. And I could argue there's nothing new here. Maybe it's just, something old in new clothes and therefore we're all going, oh, this is so exciting. But I can remember growing up paying for things on installments,
Yeah, there was this, what was the name of the shop? Hobby Hall or something here in Finland?
Yeah.
That based their business exactly based on this, which is paying with installments with a hefty fees on top, of course. But you're right. The core of this story is that this is kind of going back to the roots of BNPL. It started off as a completely unregulated space where you could do these installment payments. And then if you missed your payments, you had to pay a lot of fees and penalties. This is another twist on that. And this is interesting to me due to the fact that this almost entirely removes the risk of non-payment for you as an organizer who are selling access to your event. Because for the buyer, the event doesn't happen if you don't make all your payments. And even in those cases, you make the service fees plus you're able to sell a ticket again. So this is kind of addressing some of the problems for BNPL providers that we talked about earlier related to non-payment. So basically being delinquent on your payments. And then you have to do the collections on that, and then it becomes a very negative business case for you, especially if in the end they default on their loans. So those risks are eliminated in this case. So for as an organizer, I think this is a reuse of something old, bit of something new, and then finding a good way to mitigate the risks that have been identified in this space now over the past 5 to 10 years. So yeah, I think this is an interesting model that we're probably going to see more and more for things that are applicable to this model, i.e. some that you do full payment before the actual thing happens. Funnily enough, you could twist this into this. A long time ago when we talked about this BNPL, we also referred to a model called Save Now, Buy Later, where the idea is that you dedicate an account, perhaps even with interest, for a certain purchase. And then once you meet that goal, then you get the product shipped. So again, doing this kind of prepayment. This is kind of exactly that. So you only get to go to the festival if you make all your payments.
Yeah, except for the fact that a save now, buy later, if you don't make it, you get your money back. But what you're saying here is you get some credits, which to me almost sound like some sort of another version of a Ponzi token thing, right?
Hey, you haven't seen my Coachella merch. They're kind of cool. But anyway,
not sponsored.
Yeah, so So anyway, this is I can only predict more growth in this segment for our organizers, especially because we see more and more extravagant festivals with more bigger and bigger ticket prices moving in, and since the demand for these festivals is so high and they all sell out in minutes usually. It is a very lucrative business proposition for the organizers, and that's why I think this is we're going to see more of this. We will revisit this conversation maybe next year, so let's see where we are then. Good, but hey, let's wrap up on the sponsored content here, quote unquote, and move on to the last thing we absolutely have to cover this week, and that is the fact that we are coming up now in May. Finally, to the big event of the year here in Finland, the Nordic Fintech Summit. Janne, you are one of the key organizers, of course, of the event. How's it going with the Nordic Fintech Summit today?
Very good, very good. Looking forward, just around the corner. So starting on Wednesday, we have some roundtable discussions, pre-event networking. The main day is on Thursday. So Vanha Satama, May 15th, we have 3 stages, lending, payments, and embedded finance. And then a lot of different side hustles, some dinner networking, karaoke. I think we will drop some Eurovision songs on stage, and also some additional stuff on Friday, but really looking forward. And a lot of people coming all over the Europe. Of course, strong presentation from the Nordic countries and Baltic countries, but also from elsewhere in Europe.
And you will be able to also meet me and Paul, in addition to Janne, at the Nordic Fintech Summit, as we will be making a special episode, as is tradition, from the Nordic Fintech Summit. And for the first year, by the way, both me and Paul are getting media passes, so that's going to be fun. I just need to find my kind of old-fashioned reporter hat with like the press thing in the band. But beyond that, we will be media partners now in the Nordic Fintech Summit. So really looking forward to this. Paul, what's your number one thing expecting to get from the Nordic Fintech Summit?
It's going to be the same as every year. We're going to get to talk to some fantastic fintech people, some thought leaders. We're going to have some fantastic interviews. We're going to listen to some great presentations. We're going to sing some karaoke by the end of the night. I am very, very disappointed with the scheduling of this because it's on Thursday, and on the Saturday after that I'm running the Helsinki half marathon, so I can't get too drunk during the karaoke, but maybe 1 or 2 beers and a song. But I will definitely be on my best behavior on that evening because, like I said, I really don't want to have a horrible hangover as I run a half marathon.
So great discussions, poor karaoke, but a lot of fun. So I guess that is the summary of typical Nordic Fintech Summit, and I expect nothing less from this year, of course, as well.
And we do still have tickets left if some of the listeners have not registered yet. So still time to join the show and maybe even get interviewed by Paul and Ville.
Yes. Looking forward to meeting all of our listeners, of course, that make their way to the Nordic Fintech Summit, and we will see you there. And with this, we will close up this week's episode. And as always, I remind you, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your colleagues about us if you liked what you heard, or even if you didn't, tell that these guys are horrible, and we will still would like to have those subscribers and likes. And if you did like us, give a 5-star review. That really helps, especially if you drop a comment or 2 in there. That really helps other people to find this fantastic content that we bring to you every other week. So, with that being said,
I'm going to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
You forgot a very important part. Now that we've got our fantastic editor-in-chief, you need to do a call out and say this episode has been hosted by Ville, Paul and Janne, but most importantly, it has been edited and post-production done by Femi.
There you said it. So thank you, Paul, for that reminder, a very important part of the team behind the scenes. And of course, putting all of this together is one big part that we appreciate to get from Femi. With that being said, was that all, Paul? Is that still something?
That was all for this time, yes.
Okay, good. So now I can finally say thank you, and this has been FinTech Daydreaming.
This is FinTech Daydreaming.